What's up, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to Get the Mic. Finally, after our long hiatus, we have returned. And it is the only show, as you remember, if you were a fan in the past, where we, your host on the left, Owl,
Your host on the right, Brock.
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. Today, as you can see in the episode title, it says A Chat with Zav Arts, which actually I need to adjust that very so slightly. Like that, because we don't know if he's showing up. So basically, to give our viewers the background on this, is I responded to some things Xavier said on Twitter, and we agreed to talk about maybe doing a stream on Discord. We agreed to do the stream at 3, which I know it's 3:30 now, but we've been waiting for him. So that is pretty much the impetus for the stream, but I'm going to go ahead and let Brock take it away with some more background.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we actually sat down and had a conversation about Dragon Ball. I know there were some people waiting to see when we would come back. We didn't really give any hard date. It's been a long process for us to kind of get into a place life-wise where we're able to really sit down and do this again. You know, life just comes at you and gets in the way. Kids, jobs, all that fun stuff. But this felt like a really good opportunity to try to have a conversation in the community about Dragon Ball and mythology.
With
I
the
feel like
Dragon
there's kind
Ball
of a
Super
whole,
Philosopher.
yeah. I mean, well, this person, I don't know as much as Al does about them. I was just kind of looking into some of the stuff they've done and talked about. And they label themselves as a Dragon Ball Super Philosopher, so I was hoping that we could maybe teach each other some stuff. But unfortunately, as soon as our scheduled time came up, they didn't show. So we're just gonna vamp and kind of figure out what we're gonna do at the stream. It's a good opportunity to talk about the topics that we were planning on talking about anyway, I suppose.
Yeah, and also moving forward with what we're gonna do next with the show, because I'm moving again, which is awful, of course. Um, but then I should be pretty much staying put for a while, and I think that it will be a lot more tenable to be able to do these streams going forward. So
Yeah, I do see that we should have a future of being able to get some more recordings back in. It's just been a really long process, personal stuff. You
and we
know, I
want to
have a new
we're
job.
yeah, we're gonna finish. We have jobs. We're adults. Um, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, we're definitely gonna finish Dragon Ball, and we are going to probably get. I don't know. We might go through Boo. I'm not sure at this point. The more I read into this, the more I find out of it, which is good. But I know there's a lot of interference with the signals of the Muse coming down to Toriyama during Boo and Cell Saga. So we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
We'll have a better schedule probably next month. I want to say next couple weeks at least. But yeah, we we wanted to do this again. Xavier Arts, he is a fan in the community. He is followed by people like Geekdom and Jordan Lee, who we've talked about a little bit. I don't remember actually. It's been a long time. But we're back. We're so back, boys. So I guess we can get on to our first agenda topic, let's say. And that would be like we got the housekeeping stuff out of the way. So we were just talking about Elden Ring, which would be interesting to talk about too, especially because I know you, Brock, want to make a bunch of predictions before it comes out, and we're getting close to it coming out.
Oh yeah, we're coming right up on it now at this point. Got what, a week and a half before it drops.
Mm-hmm.
I'm scrambling to try to get a new character where I want them to be so that I can just flow straight into the DLC.
and not have to worry about being underleveled, all that garbage.
Well, I mean, I think I'll be underleveled no matter what, but that's kind of the fun way to play it anyway, right?
Yeah, you don't want to roll in there with like a level 800 character. That'd be really lame.
Um, so yeah, it's a bit impromptu. Would you rather discuss sort of the topics, Dragon Ball wise, that you were planning on discussing,
I mean,
and then we'll, we
we
can
can
try to
go over a couple of.
steelman what the, what the position might be that we would be talking to. That's I don't want to speak for anybody else.
Yeah, I don't know about. I don't know. I don't want to do that as much. Just I don't want to put words into anyone's mouth. But
Right.
we can definitely talk about some of the things that I wanted to talk about. We've covered some of this ground already, but this I guess will be in a more
Yeah.
succinct way, a succinct form, more or less. So we can start off where I was going to start off, which is actually halfway through the first episode. Is this? No, it's past this. So, one of the main things that I've seen in the community that really that really upsets me is the reliance on Journey to the West as source material for Dragon Ball, as if it was an adaptation. It's not that. And so the one of the things I wanted to talk to Xavier about, Xavier Arts, Xav Arts. I don't know what he wants me to call him. But anyways, um, one of the things I was going to talk to him about was this exact thing, because there is none of this in Journey to the West. Trippy Taka here, which would be Bulma's analog, first of all is a man, and second of all is like good aligned, I want to say. He is a Buddhist monk traveling west to get the scrolls, right? But that's not what Bulma's doing. She or at least in the sense that her intentions are not pure, as we see later on in Dragon Ball proper, in the actual episode. So here, just to recap what happens, Bulma encounters Goku in the wild in his forest home, and she shoots him with a gun, but Goku's okay. They go back, and she tells him about the Dragon Balls, which he has a Dragon Ball that was left to him by his grandfather who died. So when Bulma realizes he has one of the things she's looking for, because she wants to collect all the Dragon Balls to get a wish to have a boyfriend, the perfect boyfriend, actually. And so when she finds out that Goku has one of these, she tries to tempt him by using her feminine wiles to get him to give her the Dragon Ball. And Goku's response is this: I don't want to touch your dirty butt. Now, the significance of Bulma's promiscuity and Bulma's panties in these first couple episodes is really important. It's not just like Toriyama's a pervert. He likes to talk about these kinds of things, I guess. There is a point to it. But I'll go ahead and let Bob. Well, it's live, whatever. I'll go ahead and let Brock say it. Tell us all about it.
I really like the way that it's set up at the beginning, because there's this situation where it's foreshadowing what's going to happen, I think, in the very next episode with Bulma losing her panties, right? So what she does is first she tries to use, she's saying, she's showing her butt to him, right? But fundamentally, what you're seeing in the image is she's trying to use the fact that she has these panties to manipulate Goku into doing what she wants him to do. And it doesn't work. And because of this, then further on in the second episode, Goku removes them and she doesn't know. So it's a setup of this. She loses it because of her encounter with Goku here and trying to use him in that way.
Right. It also confuses Goku, because his grandfather told him to always treat girls nicely, and by doing so, there's this expectation of propriety that exists in Goku's mind about women, about girls. And so when
Right.
she does this, he even says like he's confused. I don't want to. Why would I want to do that? Right? Like why would I want to diminish the spirit of the female so that I can feel better? Like
Right.
it's really well
And this is part of
explained.
that fall for Goku, right? Because fundamentally, what we're doing in the first season, I'll just call it here, is that we're seeing Goku go from a state of non-dualism into a state of dualism, and so the concept of the other, which Bulma is approaching him as a representation of otherness, right,
Mm-hmm.
is inducing this to happen. And so we see it played out like on the stage of the season between, for instance, Bulma and Yamcha and Oolong and Puar and all of that with that dualism. But it's sort of all rotating around Goku. His descent into sort of a non-dual, or from a non-dual to a dualistic world, out of the garden, out of the place where, for instance, the Dragon Ball is his grandfather. Then we have to differentiate things are not they're not just one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is how it's introduced to Goku, is through a shock of impropriety, when in reality in the garden, whenever things are perfect, there is propriety, right?
Right. Right. And then I mean, for Adam and Eve, it shocks themselves the impropriety that they've been exhibiting after they've eaten the knowledge of good and evil, right?
Yeah,
That's
precisely.
when
And
they
that
get
whole
self-conscious.
covering of themselves versus being able to be naked, right?
Right. And here, I mean, Goku even recoils, like he doesn't know what's going on. He's like, why is she mad? She's mad now that he doesn't want to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, and we can see just in this very first interaction with Goku and Bulma, and in regards to her panties, because I mean that's pretty much what we see there. It's painting us a picture of how men and women do act, how they're supposed to act, like how the masculine and the feminine are supposed to interface, and that's kind of what we get in the throughout the first season, and that's really, and it happens again and again, because like the whole character of Launch will come, we'll get into that as well. Not today,
Right.
maybe, who knows. I wasn't planning
Doubt
on
it.
talking about it, but we'll see. So yeah, the first interaction there, that's what we see, and then the next one we said happens kind of at the end, right? Yep. Here we go. Everyone's
Right.
favorite.
So this is the continuation of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead and explain to us what's going on here, Brock.
This is something that really, it took a little while before I realized what I was seeing at the end of the episode. The first episode ends with essentially Bulma being captured by this pterodactyl dinosaur, and Goku having to take her bike and save her, and basically attack with the power pole to knock her out of its clutches. And then she falls, catches onto a tree, and I think it was before this happened, she said something about how she needed to pee. Whenever she's being carried, she's like, "Stop, Goku, I need to pee."
Mm-hmm.
And then, or not stop Goku, but stop him, Goku, because I need to pee. And then whenever she falls and catches onto a branch, the episode ends with Goku laughing at her as she's peeing herself, and there's these golden droplets like dropping down, as she's been saved, but she's hanging from this tree branch on the stick, or a root or a branch sticking out of the side of this cliff. And it's really funny because the panties are a piece of this, and we see this brought back up further and further whenever Oolong becomes more a part of the story, which essentially Bulma is captured by the dragon. Goku is called to save her. And in the traditional story of, the princess is stolen by a dragon, then the hero goes out into the forest and saves her and brings back the gold. And so in this weird little interaction, the gold is actually shown as Bulma's pee.
Mm-hmm.
The pee is used further in the story as a mark of revealing oneself, of revealing your own nakedness, essentially. And that's how Bulma calls to, for instance, Oolong to embarrass him by his name and forces him to have to go to the bathroom. And also we see pretty much right away in the second or third episode, Goku just has no shame peeing in front of anybody, because for him that sort of layer that the panties represent, it's not existent.
Right.
Goku doesn't have the shame of needing to cover himself up because, like I said, at this point in time, he's a non-dual entity that's being introduced into dualism,
Right. And
into the post-cosmogonic.
yes.
But yeah,
And
anyway, the gold that he gets for rescuing the princess is Bulma's embarrassment, as represented by her golden pea. And then that kicks off the chain of everything to do with Bulma's panties all the way up to the final episode of the first season.
right. And Bulma's what do I want to say? Bulma's oh goodness. The exposure of Bulma at that part is because she's saved by Goku. Like it is the action of the pre-cosmogonic hero to bring back rightful wisdom, which is having women be not acting like Bulma, let's say, and brings that to the present. And that's how Goku interacts. That's kind of the two-way street, because we do see how Bulma affects Goku, but also Goku affects Bulma. And
exactly, yeah, and then that plays out immediately in the next episode, right?
Right. And in the next episode is when we see the famous scene. Right? Is that this one? Hold on, let me see. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there it is.
Huge, huge, huge. Huh. So she takes a bath, and Goku offers to help wash her, all this, because he doesn't, like we said, he's not a dualistic entity yet. Let's pass this. Not saying that the Pilaf stuff isn't worthwhile. It is. Oh yeah, it's at the very end of this episode, isn't it? Oh, we missed it. There it is.
Oh, there it is. So I'll let you take it on what happens in this scene.
Okay, so
Of course, we've got the two different colored masculine and feminine birds setting up for what's happening in this scene, right?
oh, I didn't even notice that. Let me see.
Yeah,
Yeah, look
there
at
you go.
that. Look at that. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty apparent what's going on. And so Goku has to discover the right relationship with the feminine, and the first way to do that is to the first way that he does that, let's say, is that he explores the intricacies of femininity, including the loss of their oh my gosh, it's not pride. What am I trying to say? There's a word I'm trying to get at, but I've lost it. I used to describe it this way all the time, Brock. What is it? That she's lost her what?
She's lost her claim to virtue, essentially her own internalized claim to virtue by
Yes.
coming into contact with someone um, who's wholly good, who doesn't have any sort
Modesty.
of disconnect
Modesty.
there.
That's what I was trying
Modesty,
to get
yeah.
at. Yes. Okay. I was dying for that
But
word.
essentially, yeah.
So what we said here, right, is that the first thing that Goku does is removes the panties, which removes the modesty from the feminine spirit in the story. And why does that happen? Because Bulma already interjected. She's the one that brought it up, right? She's the one that began to use it to try to get to her own ends. And by doing so, she's removed the modesty of the feminine spirit in this representation, which is, as we've been trying to say, mythological and symbolic. So those two things will basically translate to the loss of the modesty of all women when women act this way. And so the first thing that Goku does is realizes that. And then there's a turtle, which I'll let you I'll let you talk about the turtle.
I totally forgot about this line here where it's like you're going to turn into a turtle, setting up what happens with immediately after this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, the way that I like to word what happens here with the removal of Bulma's panties essentially is that she uses the panties as a sign of her own modesty and tries to use it to manipulate it for her own ends, which Toriyama obviously believes is the wrong way to behave.
Mm-hmm.
So because she has done that, she's brought a judge down on herself in the form of Goku, because Goku is wholly good, meaning that her claim to virtue is not right. It's not righteous because she's doing what she's doing in the story for selfish reasons. So, for instance, she wants to take the Dragon Balls and wish for the world's greatest boyfriend. However, she's not behaving in the way that would make her the world's greatest girlfriend. So, because of that, she loses her ability to do exactly what she's doing. She loses the ability to shield herself with this claim of virtue because she has been judged as not having that virtue by, wise actors, let's say, in the story.
Right, and so she
And
loses
so
it,
what
and
shows up
she
at the
doesn't
doorstep,
realize
but the
that
voice, yeah, exactly. She's unconscious to it. And that's a silly thing, right? It doesn't make sense logically that from this point until the point that they get to Master Roshi, she just doesn't know she doesn't have them. It's a goofy joke payoff for most people, but it's a representation of her state, like how she is now after this scene, right?
unconscious, her own lack of modesty, right? And the
Exactly.
lack of knowledge that acting in that manner loses you that modesty.
And another thing to point out too is that they're in this house that was born out of the capsule that she inherited from her father.
Yes.
To create, out of potentiality, to create a home, for instance. And just like she loses her ability to use the panties to manipulate people to do the things she wants, further down the line, whenever this gets exacerbated, she then loses her ability to do what they did in this scene with the capsules, right? That's how she loses them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really fundamentally the story of season 1, is Bulma's impropriety losing her things until it finally gets returned to her in the wish at the end of the season.
At the very end, by the masculine spirit that she denigrates the whole time.
Exactly, but we'll getting a little ahead of ourselves on that.
Yeah.
But essentially, so here, what shows up at the door now, but Kame, right, which translates to God, asking them to assist him in getting back to the ocean, which is funny because sea turtles don't lose their direction. They're known for not being able to, or not needing to find their way back to the ocean because they have an incredible sense of direction. So it's essentially he comes in as a test and asks for them to help him out. And of course, Goku says yes, and Bulma essentially is not about it. She's like, I'm on my quest to get my Dragon Balls for me, and doesn't want Goku to help out Kame. So this is now an external representation of this lack of virtue that she's going to be forced to come to terms with, that is a part of her, right?
Right, yeah. And hold on, something's happening with the stream. Yeah, the thing is too that I like that she's unconscious about her own loss of virtue, because she has the opportunity here to pretty much gain it back, right? But she chooses not to. And so it's and the interaction Goku has too with Turtle is that he automatically will help him, like we were saying earlier. He is the embodiment of the pre-cosmogonic hero in season 1. And so he is of course willing to help out the voice of God and walk with God, which he is going to do. Because he's doing the things that he's supposed to do, let's say. And interaction with Bulma, the way he's done it has been, even though people are like aghast at removing her panties, whatever, but the way he's interacted with her has been forthright and proper. And so he also has the opportunity to improve his spirit here, and he does so by agreeing to help God back to the sea. And we also,
and of course, it's a very. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's also interesting to point out that the voice of Turtle and the voice of Kami later on in the show is the same.
Oh yeah, that's true. And what essentially is going on right now too? It's like, even whenever Goku does that, you see that she's calling him a hick. She's like, "You're an idiot and a hick for trying to carry this turtle to the sea," right? See, Bulma's sophisticated. She's not a hick, but Goku's unsophisticated. He's a country bumpkin. So it's also that technological thing happening with this fall from the garden, right? Because what is the first type of technology ever invented? Of course, is clothing. That's what happens in the story of the Garden of Eden, is that it's a fall into technological thinking because of being post-cosmogonic, meaning, for instance,
Planning for the future.
Adam has to work the earth.
Yeah, having
right?
to work the earth to store for the future, things like that. Yeah.
And so that's why Bulma is calling Goku a hick specifically in this context, is that she views his way of being as simple, as doing something like this for the sake of just getting or doing the right thing. To her, who has this technological knowledge about the way things are, doesn't make sense. She's like, that's backwards, and it's simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
So
and we also have to
of
mention
course then
she's
we
from
see
the
fallout of that.
Of course, Bulma's from
Right,
the
she
city.
is from the city.
She has to be, because she
Natural.
represents all that is feminine, right? Civilization, unfortunately, skews towards the feminine over time, repeatedly. So if we
Right, but
if we want to talk about
interesting.
Rome, we want to talk about Rome for a
Yeah.
second. The end of the Roman Empire was filled with like very promiscuous things happening in the city, like orgies, saturnalia, things like that, and so that tendency, and if you look at like Weimar Germany, things like that, you can see a pattern for sure where it goes towards that promiscuous social nature that can arise when there's a lack of a guiding order or a logos.
Right. I mean, it's sort of the thing. The feminine principle, what it does and what Eve does in the story of the Garden of Eden, is essentially she's letting the feminine chooses what to permit, what to let into the garden, so to speak. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the masculine creates the border and keeps things out, but the feminine is the spirit that incorporates things back in. And so there's that issue with the snake, which is the trick of Satan, so to speak, which is the snake is tricking Eve into welcoming what the snake represents into the garden,
Mm-hmm.
what Eve lets in, because that is her nature, is something that causes them to fall, right? And so that promiscuity is kind of a continuation of that, right? There's a breakdown that happens whenever that filter isn't right, and the wrong things are let in. The wrong things are permissible, right? And I think fundamentally that's what is going on, what this first season is talking about, and it continues past that in the show. But I think Toriyama, what was going on for him, was kind of talking about where that the lack of that permissibility, or the lack of being able to make the right permissibility for the feminine spirit, creates lots of issues. And we see that with the bunny gang. We see that with many different things throughout this first season.
Don't forget when she shrinks herself.
Of course.
Like, there's just so many.
That's a great one.
There's so many instances of it. So I changed the title, and while I was typing out her name, I was like, we haven't even talked about her name and how it actually just means panties. Like, her name.
Yeah, her name is Panties.
Imagine her name is Modesty. Like, it would be very apt to do that, because it would be so ironic that the way that she acts, the way that she does, and that's why the name is funny. That's why it works. But
we don't have to talk too long specifically about. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's not just that Toriyama was like, I would think it's funny to have this whole everyone named in her family after panties. It's like, no, it's because what her family represents that are named after articles of underwear, because they are they exhibit in the story the lack of modesty that is required, more or less. Not so much her dad ish. I don't know.
Well, her dad is named Dr. Briefs, right? And he's this world-renowned scientist. They're like the greatest scientists in the world, and they created Capsule Corp.
Yep.
And like I said, what is the first type of technology ever invented? Well, it's underwear. It's coverings for one's nakedness that were created out of that post-cosmogonic state that man falls into, right? So Bulma is now a continuation of that. She is both a representation of technology, But she's also named after the first technology, right?
Yeah, and she is not using that technological and uh, wait, what am I trying to say? Ancestral gift, let's just say it that way, properly.
Yeah, that heritage. Yeah, and because of her improper use of it, it's sort of the impetus for the whole plot of season one. And so now we
Mhm.
finally see the payoff of that. I was going to say earlier, we don't need to spend any time really talking about the interaction with the bandit on the road,
No.
other than to say that Bulma does not want to continue on this path and wants to give up Turtle to this bandit. And Goku's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Turtle hears this, right? And so this judgment is sort of cast on, oh, you're willing to just throw me away, the voice of God, for the sake of getting what you wanted. You
That's
know?
exactly it. But that's exactly it. Is Bulma is by her nature as an unintegrated feminine spirit who is missing the masculine order in her psyche that would allow her to orient herself properly. She does choose, because of her pathologies, whatever, to throw away the voice of God to get what she wants, and that's what villains do, isn't it?
Exactly.
I'm not gonna clickbait and make the title Bulma's the villain of Dragon Ball? Question mark, question mark. Although, I mean, it's what a lot of people do. So then we see Roshi, and we'll talk about Roshi briefly just in the context of her panties. And Roshi is the spiritual father. He rides on Turtle in here. His shirt has all these letters on them because he is a facsimile for the spirit of the father. And what did the spirit of the father do? But create in a, what do I want to say? Create in a way that separates order from chaos using divine speech, and that's what Roshi does with the Kamehameha wave, for example. And
Yeah,
so,
that's the purpose of the letters. You see that everywhere in
mhm,
other things. I mean, if I wanted to point at one thing that people will make no connections to Dragon Ball, but it's the exact same concept, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Why are there letters going up and down your arm and swirling around you every time you do a shrine? It's a representation of the same thing that Roshi's shirt and the magic words represent, which is the divine logos. And
mhm,
what you're doing is in Zelda is the same thing. You're interfacing with the divine logos to differentiate the chaos that it has been taken onto yourself.
right. And so he has the ability to separate a chaos from order, and then he is upset at Bulma for wanting to leave Turtle. And he gives Goku his Dragon Ball, which shows that following the voice of God for not your own ends can give you treasure and wisdom that you didn't expect, because they didn't know that Roshi had a Dragon Ball. So instead, he gets the dragon. Oh no, he doesn't get the Dragon Ball. He gets this, and then Bulma gets the Dragon Ball with the
Goku gets
thing.
the
Yeah.
Nimbus, yeah.
So Goku gets the Nimbus, which we, for the purposes of this video, will just skip for now. Although Bulma can't write it because she already lost her panties. Of course, she can't write it. So we skip to here. Yeah, here it is. So she asks him for the Dragon Ball because she's obviously after what she's after. And he asks Turtle if she helped. Like, did she listen to you? Did she adhere to the voice of God? And she tries to claim yes, but obviously Roshi can see through it because of his ability to separate chaos from order. He can instantly separate the fog from the clear day here and know that, see her for what she is. And that's precisely what happens, specifically because her modesty has already been removed by Goku, that it's actually way worse what she does. Which, there it is. So she flashes Roshi to get the Dragon Ball. And not to touch too much on why Roshi's a pervert, but there is a way, or there is a method to the madness, let's say, for Roshi being the way that he is. And one of them is that he never fully integrated with the female spirit. Obviously, he's a hermit. He never got married, right? Anything like that. And so that restriction on himself has left its mark in a way or two. We'll just leave it at that, unless you want to say anything else about Roshi right now, Bob. Brock?
Just one thing. Specifically that when when Roshi is saying to Bulma, I'll give you the Dragon Ball if you can show me your panties.
Mm-hmm.
In his mind, and we see this flash across his sunglasses as he stares at her, what we should be seeing is that he thinks that she is conscious of the fact that she doesn't have them. And that basically he's embarrassing her by asking her to show him, and she'll basically be like, well, I don't have any, right? And then that would be sort of her admitting that she doesn't have that virtue, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, she's unconscious to it, and he doesn't know that she's unconscious to it. So she flashes him, not knowing that she's showing him that she lacks that virtue. And so through seeing her nakedness, he then gives her the Dragon Ball because it's sort of, he's made her conscious of that fact now.
And that
because he is the judge
that
in that
wisdom,
sense.
Even her interaction there did indeed give her wisdom, even though she has it's a hard lesson for her because she didn't want to listen the first time, let's say.
Right.
Oh, this crocodile!
So,
I totally forgot about that crocodile.
Great character.
Amazing, huge character.
But that's the main thing, is that in the same way that we're gonna see it come back up with like the Ox King, for instance, that judge of this father spirit. That's what Roshi's doing. He already knows that she doesn't have her panties. So it's not that he wants to see her naked. It's that he wants her to see her own nakedness or to admit to it. Right. And so because she's forced to, then she inherits the Dragon Ball from him.
Exactly. And so...
And Roshi does that as a test all the time. I just want to say, like, a lot of the things that he does that are quote-unquote perverted are tests. He exists in that way as a test to other people.
Oh, for sure. I mean, not even just in that way. Like, as a martial artist as well, he serves as a test.
Right.
Whenever we get into, like, tournaments, August, and things like that. I want to talk about Senor for a little quick second, because right after her wisdom is gained, right, and she realizes that her modesty had been removed, that what happens is a facsimile of a masculine spirit is created by Bulma that is right here, Oolong. She does this as a response to Roshi's her interaction with Roshi, more or less. Because now she realizes that she has to integrate masculine qualities into her own self so that she can be a whole person instead of being a feminine spirit, more or less. Well, not even that, because being a feminine spirit is not something bad, but being a corrupted feminine or a fallen feminine spirit, let's say. And so something that she does as a response is create Oolong. And now Oolong is this shape-shifting, first of all, pig, obviously, because it's Bulma's intonation of the masculine, right? It's what she assumes men are going to be. And so he's a pig, he shapeshifts, and he has this like harem of girls that he actually hasn't done anything with because they all like order him around and stuff. So he is beta AF. And it's all laid out as Bulma's it's all laid out as a analog to Bulma's psyche here. What would you like to say about Senor?
So I think that's a really good way of putting it. He is an extracted part of Bulma that is a shapeshifter that essentially is a failure of a masculine spirit to be in its proper relationship to the feminine spirit. And that's the first thing that we see of Oolong, is that he, in one breath, is both attempting to be a tyrant and also as being tyrannized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I find interesting, because we talked about Oolong, or we talked about Bulma's name and Dr. Briefs and kind of how those names matter. It's tough to say what Oolong's name really means if we were to try to extract a meaning behind him being named that. But I will give you probably the closest that I can get, which is that there is a tale of a man named Wu Liang or Wu Long, who discovered oolong tea by accident when he was distracted by a deer after a hard day's tea picking, and by the time he remembered to return to the tea, it had already started to oxidize. That's probably the only thing I've been able to find that would give any context to the name oolong. But that distraction and following a deer really does remind me of oolong a bit because of how his attention is so corrupted, right? He is chasing after he's chasing after panties, essentially. He's always chasing after women because he is that way, because of what he's born out of.
Right, because that's what Bulma thinks men are.
But that's fundamentally the ultimate hijacking and distraction of attention, where proper attention, of course, is to not look at it, right? So it's like Bulma, by enticing people to look at that, has created a beast of attention that is wrong attention.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, constantly paying attention to the wrong things. But in the end, getting something that is actually worthwhile, which is what Oolong does in the end of the season. So, and I think that's I think that story's not too far off. Now, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, Toriyama knew about this guy and he made Oolong based on him. So therefore it has no other meaning. Anyways,
I'm just trying to find any reason whatsoever that he would be named Oolong. And the oldest story of an Oolong named Wulong is about a failure of attention. That's basically as close as I can get. You're probably not going to find Toriyama in an interview saying, that's why I named Oolong Oolong, because no one's probably ever really asked him that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them just pass it off as jokes anyways. I would say so. I think also the fact that tea has a lot of medicinal and healing qualities, and so if we trace that story out and wait for Oolong to come back and realize what he's sown with the tea that actually improves himself in the story, in our story Dragon Ball here, is when Oolong's attention is finally diverted back to what it should be, right? He restores Bulma's modesty.
Exactly. And we'll return also to one aspect of Oolong in a minute, because now that we're getting to this next phase of the story, one, the loss of the capsules, and two, the introduction of Yamcha and Puar, it gives Oolong better context, right?
Definitely. And it kind of helps people piece it together. I mean, Puar and Oolong it's not a coincidence that there's two of them. They're opposite genders of who they're basically attached to. This is not an accident. So this is Yamcha, the Desert Bandit. So the beginning of this episode is where they lose the capsules. First of all, they run out of gas. And that, I mean, we talked about that in our episode too. The fact of being able to run out of gas, right? Being in the unknown, being unfueled spiritually, such that specifically because the way Bulma's acted, the removal of
specifically
has left her void I was going to say left her void of the ability to get where they're trying to go, because you cannot move if you're not oriented towards the right thing. Go ahead.
That's exactly where I was about to land. It's attention. The failure of attention is why they run out of gas, right?
Yeah.
It's a failure of attention and orientation that, one, Oolong is born out of, and then two, lands them in the situation where then they need to rely on Oolong,
And here, I love this part where she fishes him out with the panties. It's because she knows what he is. She knows him so well from the very first time they interact in the show, and it's because he is a creation of her mind, more or less. Of maybe not of her mind, but I mean, he actually exists. But as far as his role in the story, he is a part of her. And so she knows herself, and so she knows Oolong. Now, does she know all about herself and accept all those things? Probably not. In fact, very much no. But she does know, just because she doesn't own up to her own flaws doesn't mean she doesn't know they exist. Which is kind of what we were talking about earlier with Orochi, thinking that knowing that she had no panties on.
Right, and the self-consciousness now that she has, because of being observed to be naked, has created a situation here where there's a discordant twin her. She was one, now she's two, right? That's that non-dualism falling into that dualism that I was talking about.
Right, exactly.
And so there's an issue because she's immature and just now confronting the self-consciousness.
Yes, and here she is on the lake, which is kind of a buffer of waters, a buffer for consciousness, more or less. And so, especially in fiction. And so, yeah, definitely. Let's see. Let's continue here. I think. Oh, the candy thing, the pea thing that we were talking about earlier. So, the pea, the gold, the of the dragon that Bulma excreted out at the end of the first episode.
Excreted
out. Now Bulma's decided to use the knowledge of that to her own ends, very Sauron-like, bending it to her will. And so what she does is she tries to be a tyrannical mother, basically, to Oolong. She tries to order him around and all this by I don't know, by blackmailing, but like, it's not necessarily blackmailing. But the candy itself and the oh my gosh, this scene is hilarious. The candy itself and the fact that she gave him that edible, it's almost Eve-like in that sense, is that she gives it to him, he eats it, and now she has control over him. She has brought him under her thumb, more or less. And so with the candy and the pea is how she does it, because she's used her knowledge of her own vulnerability and her own feminine spirit to entice Oolong and trick him into taking this so that she can control him. And saying that women can trick men using their feminine wiles such that they are now enslaved to them is not something that doesn't exist. Not only that, but Bulma is also acting improperly by trying to enslave the masculine spirit that's actually supposed to redeem her.
Not only that, but she's induced a self-consciousness into Oolong when she does it, basically against his will. So whenever what she can do to embarrass him is she can either call his name. There's two translations of what she says, right? She can either call him Piggy, 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 which is essentially his name, and also bringing you back to Journey to the West, Piggy, is a character.
Yeah.
Not the same character, but one of those things that people look at and they say, oh, well, this is obviously just a reference to Journey to the West. But calling him by name or saying PPP causes him to be embarrassed and to reveal himself. Like I said before, going to the bathroom is the revealing of oneself, right? So she basically makes him self-conscious by calling his name and embarrasses him. And she uses the fact that she now has control over his self-consciousness to manipulate him and use it towards her own end, which is an unholy thing to do.
Right.
And it's ironic that that's specifically how she loses the capsules, right?
Right. She loses it because of her denigration of the masculine spirit, which is how she got the capsules in the first place, because the masculine spirit of her father is the one that she inherited those capsules from. And I also want to mention that now they're in the desert because once that system has been torn down, in Bulma, now she has no orientation. She has no way to set their values. And so, like the Jews or the Israelites, I should say, in the Old Testament, leaving Egypt, they immediately go into the desert. And that's where Bulma finds herself here, is in the desert, where they need spiritual sustenance to proceed on the path.
I think that's a good way of putting it, because and it's not just a biblical thing. In many, many types of fiction, being in the desert is akin to losing all sense of orientation and being lost.
Yes.
That sense of not having any landmarks around, for instance, to orient yourself towards, no cardinal direction, so to say. And like I was saying earlier, this lack of attention and this misuse of attention and this manipulation of attention and orientation has essentially cost them the ability to know where they're at, and now has lost Bulma the potential to protect them from the world.
Right. And I would also say that it's the navigation of the relationship between men and women that's been most muddied by the events of the past couple episodes. And so there aren't things to hold on to much anymore, right? That Bulma had previously been holding on to, and so now it is a place devoid of sustenance and direction, because that's kind of what will happen when the value is not placed in the proper place.
Right. And before we're talking about Midnight Callers, we do need to talk about now Yamcha and Puar, who already are inhabiting this desert, right? We come upon someone who is the direct inverse of Bulma, who is also trapped in the desert, so to speak.
Yes, he's also trapped in the desert because of the same reason, though. It's that his understanding of the landscape, navigating the landscape of the relationship between the masculine and the feminine, is unknown, and he doesn't know how to get out of where he's at. Much like a desert, he's kind of lost where in what to do with femininity itself, and so he decides that he will also create a facsimile of a feminine spirit in the form of Poir, so that he can, um, again, one becoming two, and so that he can interact with this feminine spirit as a way to engage in that relationship. But it's an unholy way to do it, because much like Tinkerbell, she doesn't actually, I mean, Poir exists in the show, sure, but Poir is not ever going to be what Yamcha would need her to be, because she is a cat and a shapeshifter as well. Like we've been saying,
Right. And that's
the
a
qualities of Oolong are actually the same, similar as the qualities of Poir.
yeah, and it's also a a callback again into names, because Puar, if you translate that back from Latin, means basically young man or immature masculine person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because of Yamcha's immature masculine spirit and his inability to confront what is wrong about himself to be able to forthrightly, encounter women, now he has created a spirit named after that problem that he has, right?
Right. And I mean, yeah, he has a cat named Immature Young Person because he is one. So yeah, and that's exactly right. And that's why he finds himself in the desert too, because he's not been through it. He's not matured in that way. Now he is dangerous, as we saw in the last episode. Like, he does fight Goku, but we'll not delve into that. I think we'll just continue on. So, Midnight Callers, here we are. Oh my gosh, look at this. So, since we have two shapeshifters, they both begin trying to shapeshift to act pervy on Bulma. At least that's
Oh,
Oolong's option.
before we go too far, there's
Oh,
one other thing about Puar and Oolong that I want to point out, which is that they know each other already. They whenever they see each
yes,
other,
yes, yes.
Puar recognizes Oolong and points out specifically that they went to the same quote unquote kindergarten, and that Oolong was kicked out of that kindergarten for stealing the teacher's panties. Again, we're coming back to the panties thing, right? Which
Yep.
is to tell us that Oolong's expulsion from non-dualism, right, which we'll call kindergarten, his expulsion from this situation, or you could call it Bulma's unconscious, was due to the removal of panties. Explicitly says that, right? And
Yep.
the fact that they came from the same place is also telling us that there was something similar to that, that
Which, yeah.
essentially was the birth of Puar
And it,
for Yamcha, right?
mm-hmm. And that's what her Poir doing what?
Puar, not specifically Puar doing something, but that essentially some aspect of Yamcha that has not been put into its proper place has created a situation for Puar to be born into the world. In the same way that
Yes.
Bulma's inability to square things properly and know herself the right way, that's basically a reflection of Yamcha too.
Right. And I would also say that that really supports our claim that Oolong comes into the story and into existence after the events of Roshi's, Bulma's panties and Roshi, let's say, or lack thereof. And because of what we were just saying, he got cast out of the garden, his garden, because of the stealing of panties, because he would remove feminine modesty, and so that's
Which we
that.
can go further with Yamcha specifically too on that front, right? Which it has to do with the fact that he's a bandit and that he doesn't understand reciprocal play, which is another return back to what happened with the bandit on the road, right? So one of Yamcha's failings that has caused him to be in the situation is also an improper use of his own masculine spirit in
Mhm.
relationship to those who are weaker than them or those than him, or it's all about this interplay between the strong and the weak, the masculine and the feminine. Not to say that femininity is associated with weakness. I mean, our main character who's on an adventure, who's very strong in this story, is essentially Bulma, just not morally strong. But fundamentally, what we're dealing with is this what do you do to square the proper relationship between the masculine and the feminine? And fundamentally, it has to do with this reciprocal play, right? This thing that Yamcha has not integrated properly. And so he's got the sword that he's using, and Goku beats him the exact same way with that rock, paper, scissors, which is basically like, okay, I am a spirit that's going to, everything I do is going to push you further and further towards integrating yourself, right?
Right. I would also say that the actions Yamcha's taken, being a bandit, utilizing his masculinity in the improper way, like Bulma uses her femininity in the improper way. We also do
Mm-hmm.
see how Poir was born out of that, actually, I think, because with Poir being the one in the class that like did everything she was told and listened to the authority, right? Like she goes along with all Yamcha's banditry, even though she later on we seem to
Mm.
think is uh not violent, not like nothing like that, right? And so the feminine spirit that will go along with the corrupted masculine that's Poir's flaw. Like, sure, Oolong's flaw is the disrespect and lack of appreciation of feminine modesty, but Poir's is the
I like that.
Poir's is the lack of it's the lack of what women are supposed to do for men, because women are
Right.
supposed to
They
make men
both support
self-conscious.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're supposed to make men self-conscious. And if they don't do that, they don't go along with that, then the men are allowed to be how they are, right? And like when Tom Sawyer sees Rebecca, whatever her name is, like he becomes conscious of himself and like starts doing all this weird stuff, right? Because women make men self-conscious, or they're supposed to, and that's what Poir is failing to do right now for Yamcha. We haven't. I don't think we talked about that when we talked about the episode. That's what I mean
No,
when I
we're
said
definitely hitting on a few new things.
like the more I watch this, the more there is. That's what I'm talking about. Oh,
Oh
we
yeah.
got to talk about the bunny costume now. Gosh,
Yeah.
it's just one thing after this. The show hits hard. I'm telling you. Let's see. Too bad. That's all I have. So because all their clothes get stolen. No, all the clothes were in the capsules. Something. She loses all her clothes, which makes sense because of what we've been saying this whole time.
Yeah.
And so now she's not just lost her panties, but she's lost her clothes. And the only thing she can wear is this bunny outfit, which is completely degrading, right? Not only to Bulma, but to the feminine modesty that we've been discussing. And so, of course, Oolong would only have this because of how Oolong was created, like we said, is the disrespect of feminine modesty. So he's only going to have clothes that disrespect the modesty of the feminine spirit, as we see here. And now Bulma is doomed to wear this because of her actions, and the way she's treated Oolong actually is part of the reason I would say she has to wear this.
Yeah. This is an extension of what we were just saying with Poir, which this is Oolong enabling Bulma and pushing Bulma towards using her feminine spirit in an improper way, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah. It's all about, and that's what those two characters can, and they can be good characters. Like they can be helpful towards their host. I don't know if I want to say they're like symbiotes, but like sure, their host. They can do good
Yeah.
things for their host, but that it's up to the host themselves to interact properly with them, so such that they can do that for them. Okay, let's see. So we got through that pretty much. Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna
So
have to mute for a second, so I'm gonna let you explain how this kind of flows. This bunny costume flows into the next thing for Bulma,
well, the
and
next
also the
thing,
Ox King for
yeah.
that matter.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's where. Well, because Boss Rabbit doesn't come till episode 9. She's in this outfit for like 4 episodes. Oh gosh. So the next thing they do is they go to find the Dragon Ball on Mount Frypan, which has the Ox King. And in our episode, when we talked about the Ox King, we talked a lot about his design. So let me fast forward to him. Here he is. So he has these like goggles. Oh no, what did I do? So he has these goggles. Oh, nice. I got it like right on the next one. And those goggles, and we see like a point of view shot from him too, which is really interesting because it rarely happens in Dragon Ball. Not rarely, it only occasionally happens in Dragon Ball. And it's every time it's used for a purpose. And so we see like a telescopic view of what the Ox King sees, and he really zones in on him. That's because it's the societal father. They can see who you for who you are to society, and so seeing these, he thinks they're thieves. But this is all a long story to talk about the Ox King. So we're not going to talk too much about him. We are going to skip through to get to the parts about Bulma. But just so you know, we just wanted to briefly touch on where they're going and how the Ox King also can see them for who they are, especially Bulma. Let's see. So what they need to do and what Ox King tells them is that they need to find the Bancho fan, which is interesting because it's going to bring in Chi-Chi to the story. Yep. So Chi-Chi's already trying to find the Bancho fan. And the Bancho fan itself, which if we talk about that, we'll have to talk about the end of Dragon Ball. So we'll just put that aside. They can't find the Bancho fan. Roshi threw it out or whatever. But it brings up the interaction that Goku has properly with Chi-Chi later on, which I guess we can get to. Because yeah, this episode's like a two-parter basically. So they go and find Roshi so that he can put out the fire of Fire Mountain, which is the chaos that has arisen with the societal's father's failure to pay attention in the right place, his failure to rule properly. And so we see that Fire Mountain it's basically a kingdom that is on fire. What else could that be besides chaos? And so we need someone who can separate chaos from order to revert things to the way they should be. And that's why they go and get Roshi. And so they talk to him, and Roshi basically says he'll help them, but he has to be able to like see Bulma, like talk to Bulma, whatever. And again, this is because Roshi is the spiritual father and he needs Bulma to see herself for herself. And so he needs to interact with her again so that he can participate in his cosmic duty, more or less. And so we go forward. They get there. We figure out that Ox King was a student of Roshi's, all that. And look, you've slaughtered countless people to protect your treasure. That's how Fire Mountain came about, because of the blindness of the societal father to properly orient himself in the community. And so Roshi basically chastises him for this. And then we see again an example of those magic words. Oh, wait. No, first we see this. That's right. So he basically goes to Bulma and wants her to flash him again so that he and then he'll put out the fire. And what Bulma does is she tries to trick him. She tries to get Oolong to do it. That's right. Okay. Yep. So, but they agree to this this exchange. Roshi will get to grope Bulma, I suppose, her breasts, and in exchange, he'll put out the fire of Fire Mountain. And that's what we see here, the very first Kamehameha wave, which, like we've said, the magic words that set order from chaos is a Logos idea. It's not just a martial artist thing. It exists through multiple mediums in multiple ways. And so, Roshi here, using the Kamehameha wave, separates chaos from order, but he is not the hero. He is the spiritual father. So he destroyed the whole castle instead of just putting out the fire. And that's a limitation, I would say, of the spiritual father's role in the story. He cannot solve the same problems the hero could solve. And speaking of could solve, that's literally what happens at the end of Dragon Ball, is Goku solves this problem without destroying the mountain, which it's so good. I know it's filler. Some people don't like it, but it's amazing.
Oh, it's necessary. And we also see somewhere, maybe like in the second season or the third season, it might be at the beginning of the third season, where Goku goes on this little side adventure and uses the Kamehameha to fix a society of a bunch of like dragon people. Or no, it's actually closer to the end. The same people that the Guru Gum technique fighter has. They have a problem where essentially the only way that Goku is able to set it right is to use a Kamehameha wave on a big mountain, and it actually makes the water flow forth and fixes their issues, right? So we have a setup along the way that Goku can do that, and he's figured it out. It doesn't happen for no reason, because then it finally gets articulated more when the whole adventure at the very end of the show comes up.
Right, which then we'd have to talk about the entire show in one stream.
Right, but fundamentally that matters because
yes,
it's Chi-Chi, and
yeah.
Chi-Chi is the proper representation of femininity,
yes.
ultimately in the show. So
yes, and that's the adventure there with Ox King. But we're not done, because we have to get that exchange. Bulma has to give her modesty up. She's gotta let Roshi grope her. But instead, she decides to again act improperly, and instead of kind of owning up to her own corruption, she decides to pin it on a scapegoat, or a scape pig for this example, being Oolong, and her undermining the masculine authority is what makes this play out badly. And so Oolong transforms into her, and she basically blackmails him to do it, right? And so then he goes over and he does this, which is what we were saying. It's what we've been saying all along, is that Oolong's corrupted state right now induces in Bulma the impetus to act more improperly. And so here we see, as Oolong, she has given Oolong free reign to be her in the world. And so when he does, the first thing he does is continue down that path. And even worse than being groped, he offers Roshi to motorboat, more or less, on Bulma. What do you have to say about that one, Brock?
I think that's a really good way of putting it. It's essentially that it's not so much that he is shapeshifted into a facsimile of her, but he is controlling her, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
She's saying, hey, I don't want to confront this. You do it. I'll be unconscious to it. So she's like willfully making herself unconscious to what her body is doing, and allowing the spirit of impropriety to act for her. And of course, this is what it does: is it escalates it and essentially denigrates her more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Especially in what we were talking about with Roshi in the eyes of the spiritual father, right? That whole idea of him trying to get her to see her flaws, like this example of it here is it's wild because the flaw is it's what do I want to say? It's like a proxy flaw because Oolong does it because that's how Bulma actually is. That's how she's acting in the way that she's doing by degrading the masculine spirits in the way that she does. And then we
And
see
specifically degrading the feminine spirit.
well, yeah, I mean, she's obviously degrading herself, but what I was saying is by forcing Oolong to do it in the first place is
Right.
why it turned out even worse for her. So because it kind of all stems from that. The way she treats Oolong is the way that Oolong will treat the feminine modesty that he sees in her, right? And so when she treats him that way, he's gonna do what he's been doing this whole time by destroying feminine modesty. Or trying to. And so then they go away. Is there anything else you want to mention here before we move on? We're almost at the
No,
end.
I think that's
we're almost at the end.
pretty much all that Bulma has to do with the Ox King situation.
Yeah.
And of course the magic touch.
We have to talk about this because it's the Boss Rabbit episode, and it's one of the things that she's dressed as a rabbit for. It will make a lot of sense. What we were saying in our episode was that these are spirits of unrealized malevolence, right? Like a bunny is not a malevolent creature, right? But they're petty tyrants, let's say. But I'll let Brock go ahead and talk about it for a sec because I need to go get a drink.
So there's several different things going on kind of at the same time as they get into this village. So Bulma is still walking around in her bunny costume because she still doesn't have anything to clothe herself in. So it's funny because not only does she look like this, but she acts like this. And so the name of this episode is The Boss Rabbit's Magic Touch. Now this is coming off the tail of being introduced to magic words. So the immediate follow of that being a magic touch, I think it is purposeful. What I mean by that is the gang that is terrorizing this town that we see here walking up. It's a bunch of people who wear that same outfit, and their leader has a magic touch that turns people into food, turns them into something to be consumed. So we see this logical continuation of what Bulma has done, which is essentially she has opened the door for a mode of being which would treat her as though she is something to be consumed. It kind of brings back the idea, especially for the time frame that Toriyama was writing this, Playboy, specifically the Playboy bunny ears as this degraded feminine spirit to be consumed is something that is now terrorizing this entire town. And Bulma is participating in it without knowing that she's participating in it. The magic touch that this leader can do is sort of an inversion of the magic words that Roshi can do, which is to say that the masculine spirit being associated with the logos and words has the ability to have magic words, which is that it uses those to change the world. But also, there's a magic touch that's associated with the feminine spirit. So the feminine spirit being associated with the physical world, the tactile, the below, right? So the above being the sky and the logos and concepts. Then you've got the lower, which is Gaia, the earth, and fertility and the touch. Sure. And so that magic touch, right, this is a continuation of using that. We have a masculine entity using a magical touch, which is the most feminine magical power to create a situation where people are being consumed, right?
Yeah.
Which is the inversion of being born, right? The opposite of being born is being consumed. And so it's sort of this Chronos, taking it to its logical end. Yeah.
Very Chronos-like.
So that's kind of my general thought about it, and why it's the Boss Rabbit's magic touch specifically is that it's inverting. It's so inverted. It's showing how upside down the tyranny of this feminine spirit can become.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and also, exactly. Of course, Bulma being willfully making herself into something to be consumed.
And I mean, look how she's still dressing. So there's that to it too. I think I would also note that she dresses more modestly as the show goes on.
Yep,
What do you know?
that is as we get past this, her using that to get what she wants kind of goes away until later on, whenever her spirit is once again degraded by Super because she goes and wishes to have an ass that's bigger. But
Oh
I
my
don't believe that
goodness.
that's part of the mythological story.
I forgot about that. That's bad. That's really, really dumb. Really dumb and bad. But it was memeable. Memed it up. Anyways, so
But
her Bulma's interaction here is that she is part of that because of her feminine nature by the time they get there, and the fact that she's appears as if she's weaponizing her femininity. That's why everyone runs away from her. I don't know if you talked about that already.
pretty much, I didn't say it in those words, but yeah, the fact that Bulma is unconsciously participating in this sort of tyranny of the feminine spirit.
Mm-hmm. And so, what's the
Now,
ultimate?
what I think is really interesting is Yamcha's play in this, right?
Oh yeah, Yamcha. Yamcha can't interact because of he can't get near Bulma, basically. Because
Yeah,
of
that's Yamcha's problem is he's terrified of women.
right, and he's terrified of women because they would make him self-aware, which is something Poir has kind of coddled him from this whole time. Very devouring mother in that way. It's something too that happens in Peter Pan because Tinkerbell wants to like keep Peter for herself, and that's why she betrays Peter in the Lost Boys. Anyway, so to get to it here, the boss rabbit comes and turns Bulma into a carrot. Because, like we were saying, it's the inversion of that. It's the oh, there she goes. It's the forming her into be something to be consumed. That happens here. And what do we get at the end? And what's the ultimate explanation for the feminine tyranny that gets placed in the story? Is Goku can't actually fight him, right? Because the carrot they get Bulma away using the powers of Yamcha, right? Because Yamcha, once she's a carrot, once she's gonna be consumed, once she can no longer, because once a person is in that state, she can no longer make himself aware. So now he can go in and use his normal brutish masculine strengths to defeat this. I don't want to say cross-dresser, but like definitely masculine, feminine spirit. This confused thing. So Yamcha helps Goku defeat them, and then they send Boss Rabbit to the moon on the power.
Okay, before we get to the moon part of it, I do
shit.
want to point out that the way that they defeat the boss rabbit is when Yamcha has Poir
Oh,
do
that's right.
what
Yeah.
Poir is supposed to do, which takes this
Oh
masculine
yeah.
entity in Boss Rabbit and holds a mirror up to him and makes himself aware so he runs away, right?
Yes.
That's
That's
what
actually
Poir is
what
supposed
Poir's
to
supposed
do,
to do. Yep.
and
And
that's why
actually
it saves
also
Bulma.
it also is the first time we see Yamcha do something that's good. That's like the right thing to do.
Right.
And it's yeah, I think that's because of his interaction with Poir in that moment. And like we've been saying, like it really sets it up well because you'll see an interaction between Oolong and Bulma, and then something bad will happen. Or you see it like we saw with Poir here, like his interaction with Poir being on the right page, being in the right instance there, and interacting rightfully with the feminine spirit allowed him to become a better person.
Exactly.
And so then they send him to the moon. I know you have a bit to say about that. The moon obviously
I mean,
being feminine
that much is
spirit in
pretty
mythology.
obvious if
Yeah.
you know any symbols, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where the tyrannical feminine power goes, is to the moon. And I forgot what they say at the end. It's like they have to make marshmallows for the rest of their lives or something.
Yeah, they have to create food for people to eat because they've been turning people into food to eat, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like this. Their penance is to go to the moon, which is associated with femininity, and work on the moon to create well, do the role that the feminine spirit is supposed to do, which is to provide. It's supposed to. It's fertility, right? It's to provide, not to consume. Which there are two sides to the feminine spirit, right? The fly in the ointment, as Peterson would say, right? Which is that there is a birthing, but also a devouring spirit to the Great Mother.
Exactly.
And so this is putting that feminine spirit to work to the proper end, so to speak.
I'm trying to figure out this here. Oh wow. Yeah. I mean, you can just see it. You don't even need to hear what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that we see this here, her subjugation of the masculine, right? Like you said, the fly in the ointment, the devouring feminine part, which is kind of what she's using some of that power when she does this to Oolong. No one's ever gonna marry you. I love that part. It's hilarious.
Well, also just to point out, because she's done this, she lost her capsules. We pointed that out. But one of the functions of the capsules is to this mode of transportation, and so the whole point of the Midnight Callers episode and leading up to the situation they're in is that they have to rely on Oolong's mode of transportation instead of the one that she inherited from her father because of what she's done, right? Mm-hmm. There's Oolong's camper and Oolong's vehicles and all this kind of situation that they've run into. So now they're stuck. They're still in the desert, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they still have to resolve that.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see. Let's go on because I don't think there's any panty parts around here. There's one coming up though, I think.
Yeah, the stuff happening in this scene doesn't really need to be explained because it's pretty on the nose what's been happening this whole time. Mm-hmm. Is that essentially like Bulma's been acting entitled, and I guess we didn't really address the situation where Goku's original fight with Yamcha, Bulma was unconscious for it, so she didn't actually see what she needed to see. So she has sort of the wrong idea about the masculine spirit still.
Yeah.
And so there's this.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I'm trying to remember how we had kind of approached it before because I haven't talked about it in years. But the lesson of seeing Yamcha's mode of being be defeated by reciprocal play is something that Bulma doesn't have the opportunity to fully integrate into herself just yet, which is part of why we're here now and we're still fighting against Pilaf and why it's now we're pushing into the end game of season 1, right? Which is that we haven't talked at all in this video about Pilaf and what he represents, but he's sort of an inversion of both the worst aspects of both Yamcha and Bulma that
definitely he
creates
has two
a prison for them.
for himself.
Yeah. He's basically a child with an extracted masculine and feminine spirit helping him. And, calling Mai an extracted spirit, I don't feel like that's improper. Obviously they're not shapeshifters. One of them's a dog, but fundamentally that's what they're serving for him.
Right. Well, they're not shapeshifters because Pilaf is, I mean, I know you said he's a kid earlier.
Rigid.
Like he's an adult, right? Like he's actually an adult. I'm saying you were saying he's a kid.
Well, he's physically
childlike,
conveyed like a child emperor. Yeah.
Right. Now, the reason they're not shapeshifters is because, and we don't really see Oolong or Puar shapeshift like after, I don't know, season 3 of this show, something like that. Like we never see them shapeshift again, and it's because the solidification of that maturity in their mode of being is it hardens over time. Let's say so.
Less fluid, yeah.
Shu is a dog, sure, but that's because the way that Pilaf views masculinity is a tool or like a dog, right? Like it's something to be used. It's not something to be integrated properly. And then Mai is kind of an idealization almost of women, and you can see too that he's a lot more feminine than masculine. Pilaf there, and it's played out very interestingly as well inside of this 4 episode span. But that's briefly on Pilaf, so let's continue. we'll see how far we can get. So this all happens. Blah, blah. Oh, I did want to briefly mention that Yamcha and Bulma do start interacting, and like you were saying earlier, is Bulma's infatuation with Yamcha is due to the fact that she doesn't realize how immature that he actually is, because she didn't see him get defeated by play. And let's see. So let's go here. Penalty is pinball. There's definitely a part here that we need to talk about.
Oh man, I remember we talked a lot about the pinball before.
We did. Luckily, it doesn't have as much to do with Bulma's panties. They just run around. Oh man. Okay. Here it is. So they demand the Dragon Balls. Pilaf demands the Dragon Balls from them. They don't want to give it to. They don't want to give them up, obviously. And so he brings Bulma to this room to be tortured with what was it? What does he call it? I forgot what he calls it. But they're like, not that. You're not seriously going to do whatever. And so we also see here, because an actual, like, those characters would be not affected by this. That's why I think is a good supporting piece of evidence that they're facsimiles for Pilaf, is that they actually think that this is a big deal. Both of them. Like, Mai's a grown woman. And look, he's blushing
that's
right
a good
now.
way of putting it.
Pilaf is blushing right now, too, because that was his idea of degrading the feminine modesty. That was his goal with that. And it doesn't work at all, because Bulma's already been through way worse throughout her adventure here in the beginning of Dragon Ball. And so we see even Pilaf's idea of the destruction of the feminine modesty doesn't even really ring on the scale, and it helps solidify him as a not serious. Yeah, see, look at that. Yeah. Go ahead. I'll let you say some of it.
It's so funny because, there's this, the way that Pilaf works is he fundamentally is a very, very immature spirit that is allowed to have space in the story because of the, like, willful immaturity of spirit of both Bulma and Yamcha. And essentially what Pilaf has to do is trap them, and he believes that they're, in a weird way, he believes they're bad enough that the light of day essentially is basically going to burn them. Like, that they're bad in a sense that the masculine gaze, the solar sort of encounter, so to speak, when they're trapped and exposed to it, is going to burn them up. And of course, the opposite is what happens to them.
Well, let's not go that far, because we still need to talk about the dragon.
Well, fundamentally, that's where it heads towards, right? That's his plan in the long run because of that. But yeah, the dragon's essentially the payoff of the whole season.
Yeah, he says he's gonna, like, torture them later or something after he makes his wish here. Before he puts them in the oven. And so, yeah, he gets all the dragon balls and he summons the dragon. And Goku's able to use a Kamehameha wave to blast a hole through this fortress so they can see what's happening. Big enough so that these two characters, Puar and Oolong, can get out and run amok. And so let's see what happens when it's just up to those two and Oolong's little wiener. Oh, no, wait. Do we skip it? Yeah, there we go. So, Wish of the Eternal Dragon. So, Pilaf is trying to wish, but he can't. He can't articulate what he actually wants because it's so nebulous and undefined, because he is an immature spirit, as we know. So, when the dragon asks him to articulate his wish, he can't actually do it. Oolong has flown out. And he, unlike Puar, because Puar doesn't do this. This is actually that face right there That's some resolve. Anyways, it's only Oolong that can do this because Oolong is a masculine spirit. He can go into the chaos of a dragon, as we saw in episode 1, and retrieve the wisdom as such from it. And so Oolong is now determined to do that because Pilaf is failing, and it actually kind of pisses him off that Pilaf is so unmasculine and unable to articulate his wish here. That was where that resolve was from. Hold on. Let me reload because that was not working. Oh, just missed it. There we go. So Oolong runs up and with just being this is a pure form of his being that commands this to happen, and it all adds up from what we've seen in the past, right? What he wants and what happens are two different things, but they're from the same source. Give me a pair of girls' panties. And there it is. And so he wishes back the modesty of Bulma from the whole season by articulating and separating, using his own logos to separate chaos from order in the face of a dragon, and articulating that wish and returning these paintings. I mean, he doesn't give them to Bulma, but that's not the point. The point is the wishing for them, the wish for women to be modest again, let's say, from someone who is, as they just said, Oolong's a pervert, right? And that's part of his nature because of the way that Bulma more or less spawned him. So him doing this is in his nature, but it also completes the circle on his fulfillment, what he's supposed to do, and what men are supposed to do, and how they're supposed to have relationships with women. Is they're supposed to appreciate feminine modesty, and they're supposed to protect that feminine modesty.
Right. It's not direct. It's not something where Oolong runs up and he wishes for everyone to be free from the castle or something like that. What he does is symbolic, you know. It plays the joke, and then he wears the panties like a crown for an episode. Mm-hmm. He walks around with the panties on his head, which is very funny, but that is, if you think of Oolong as this spirit who's been born out of the stealing of those panties, the loss of those panties, he walks around wearing the panties on himself because that's where the panties need to be essentially returned to, is this part of Bulma, this part that she's extracted from herself. By doing this, now it needs to set things right. You know, she is too, let's say that you can call Oolong a force of the unconscious and Bulma is a force of the conscious at this point, right? She's the conscious being, whereas Oolong is this piece of her unconscious.
She's the host. Yeah.
And so we have to return that sense of modesty back to her unconscious because she knows consciously that she doesn't have that modesty, right?
Yes.
And so in her spirit, it has to be returned to her.
And the spirit is then strengthened by it and can clothe itself in that, right? And therefore be stronger by it. It's a lot like, you know, Dr. Peterson tells the story. I don't remember what book it's in, but tells the story of his son Julian and how he had the dreams about like all the dwarves spawning from the dragon, and that he had to kill the dragon, and in the end he was able to make a shield that was immune to fire out of the dragon's body. It's like that. Like Oolong's taking the vice and the chaos that is encased his entire being for the entire season and using it and making it into his own armor, more or less.
Oh, I like that. That's a really good way of putting it, you know. It's almost like, yeah, I am perverted by nature because that's what just created me. But that doesn't mean I can't be a hero.
Yeah, and Oolong is the hero of season 1, for sure. And it's all because of that. So I think we're at the end. I think we did it. We don't really need to talk about Goku's Uzaru transformation.
Well, I mean, Bulma is taken by it and does need to be saved.
That's true.
Just sort of there is one last thing I do want to say about Bulma towards the end of this, because the fallout of the Uzaru form and the realization from it essentially is that Goku because he's trapped, like I was saying earlier, got a bit ahead of myself, because he and everybody are trapped in by Pilaf because they stole his wish. He thinks that the light of day is going to burn them alive, and so they're trapped with this
Right.
glass ceiling. But it's Poir who directs Goku's attention up towards the full
Oh
moon,
my gosh, yep, of
which
course.
which then makes him transform into the Uzeru and start destroying the entire castle.
Yeah.
And when that happens, he takes Bulma a la like King Kong, and he's going to eat her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that she is saved is that finally Yamcha resolves his end of this thing, and he has Poir transform into a giant pair of scissors and cut off Goku's tail, fundamentally turning him back into, you know, just the child, and saving Bulma's life. And that fundamentally is Yamcha using Poir in that positive way that he's supposed to, right? The scissors being a move of differentiation, of separating things apart, that is what the feminine spirit is supposed to do for men, like you were saying earlier. Is supposed to differentiate them. It's supposed to burn away the things that are improper about the way that a man is acting, let's say. And so him doing that saves Bulma from being consumed by what the Uzeru represents, which is the shadow.
Right, exactly.
And when that happens, when they wake up the next day, after like everything has gone down, it's only then that Bulma and Yamcha recognize each other and get together. And so we see Bulma did get her wish at the end of the day for, you know, the perfect boyfriend. However, it's the perfect boyfriend for her because he compliments her in the way that she compliments him. And so through her encounter with the shadow, let's say her ego is finally brought down. I can't even speak. Her ego is finally brought down to the point that she sees herself through Yamcha as she really is, and is integrated. Like at that point in the story, far more integrated than we started season 1.
Right, and it's a lot of character development, and it's all the whole crux of the season, and it's so that Goku can learn this proper orientation, right? Because he carries a lot of this knowledge with him into the next seasons.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where we leave off with the whole Bulma's panty story, because it's just season 1. That's what season 1 is fundamentally about.
Yeah, I mean, she gets it back. It all closed up. It's a super tight season too. Like, yeah, it's so like every single line is so necessary and so important, and every scene is so important that harkens back to things that have already happened. It refers back to itself like all good fiction does, but it also says what should and should not happen. Women should not act this way. Men should not act this way, right? And so it's an amazing show. I don't know what else to say other than Bulma's panties are not just a gag. They are a serious part of the show that makes season 1 impactful enough for us to all enjoy the show now, because I mean, season 1 happened. If people didn't like it, it would have just been gone. We wouldn't have had season 2.
One thing I do want to point out too here, Goku waking up and then asking why he's naked. Like I said at the beginning of this is a story about that differentiation of going from non-dualism into dualism, and this is a step for Goku. That's why he does that. Why he wakes up and asks why he's naked.
He just ate the knowledge of good and evil just now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, basically. That was the cutting off of his tail, essentially, the separation of him from nature.
The shadow. Yeah. Definitely.
And so, it's and of course, you know, there's a situation where now he doesn't have clothes. Bulma says, "Give him the panties." Oolong's like, "I'm not giving Goku panties, you know, obviously, but you can wear my pants." Now Goku's clothed himself.
Because now Oolong not only has like a leg to stand on, because he can tell Bulma, like, no, that's not how the masculine spirit is supposed to be. As he, look at him, he's the epitome of the masculine spirit right now. He's got the crown. I'm telling you, look at him. And like, that's the thing. He's got the wife beater. Huge energy.
Well, he's also not wearing a communist uniform anymore, which is also the tyranny of the feminine spirit, I would say.
Oh my gosh, I know. The layers, there's just so many layers. But at any rate, let's wrap this up. We've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. So we'll wrap this up now. This was an episode on Bulma's panties. The whole episode, 1 hour and 40 minutes on Bulma's panties. If you made it this long, hooray. If we had prizes to give out, I'd give you one, but we don't have any prizes right now.
Well, I do want to tie it up as we wrap up because you had mentioned this earlier. The main thing that people try to compare Dragon Ball to just be an analog to is Journey to the West, and the main season that people say is a direct parallel to Journey to the West. Journey to the West is season 1 of Dragon Ball. It's just basically just retelling Journey to the West.
Yeah,
so please, if anyone could explain to me how this is a parallel, this whole Bulma's Panties story that is the main story of season 1 is the story of Journey to the West. I would love.
I'm gonna go further. I'll challenge someone to do that. Like I challenge the people who believe that it is only Journey to the West that's the inspiration for this show, and the manga, to point out what similarities are there between what we've talked about here for 100 minutes and Journey to the West, because I've read Journey to the West. There's a few female characters, but there's not a treatise on the relationships between men and women like season 1 is in Dragon Ball. And I think that's going to bring us to an ending spot. So, I don't remember how I used to close the show. I remember my opening, as you guys heard at the beginning, but I don't remember how I used to close it. So, I'll just say this. This has been Get the Mic on Bulma's Panties. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, like it. If you want to subscribe, please do. Hopefully, we'll have more episodes coming in the near future. Like I said, I am moving right now, but once we get that all settled in, it should be easier to go. Anything you want to end off with, Brock?
No, I think that was I like this episode. I think we really dug into it and picked some new stuff out of it. Kind of just proves that really engaging with it dialogically, you can keep on finding new things about this that make it as good as it is. So even now, after we've been talking about Bulma's Panties for years, we're still sussing out things.
We're still
about
talking
Bulma's
about
Panties.
Bulma's. We'll always be talking about Bulma's Panties. My goodness. Well, at any rate, I have been your host on the left, Owl.
I've been your host on the right,